Nancy Phillips, she currently serves as the coordinator for the Illinois Family Resource Center. She has been active in the substance abuse field for over 35 years in both prevention and treatment services. Nancy was honored as Professional of the Year in 2018 by the ICB. And during her years in the field, she has developed and trained human service providers throughout the states. And Penny Reinhold, she works as the DUI and gambling coordinator at Our House. She's been in the field of substance abuse since 2007, was certified as a PCGC in October 2020. She has worked in both the residential and outpatient programs during her years at Our House, and she is currently working to promote awareness of problem gambling and to develop programs to support treatment of this disorder. And Penny and I were just talking, I think she's over the residential program there as well, which I was joking with her, Nancy, when you were coming back on, that has to be a very fun job during COVID, right? So fun and challenging, right?
Yeah. Yes, very challenging.
Yeah. So, okay, without further ado, guys, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. As Penny and I were working on this, and we feel very excited about the opportunity to do this. We were kind of talking about this is a little bit new. She's in one place, I'm in another, and then Robbie's way a long ways from us. And so I went to put up my slides and things, and Zoom just wasn't cooperating. So we're going to have to kind of lead each other through the slides. So just be patient and work with us. I am the coordinator of the Illinois Family Resource Center. Why don't you flip the next slide, Penny, and just real quick. And there you go. It's a statewide program project. The Our House in Charleston holds the contract for that. And it's exciting to me because it works with families, with people with substance use disorder, mental health, and we're really incorporating the whole issue of gambling into this now. And we are redoing the website, which I invite you to take a look at. Wait a week, but take a look at it. And we even have a full gambling page so that we'll be posting things there to support these efforts. And of course, I'll be pulling Penny in to do some of that content. I have been in the field more than 35 years, actually over 40. And I just want to say I'm really glad and privileged to do this. I do not have the experience of a family member with a gambling disorder until this year. So this is new to me, but I certainly understand the whole impact of different kinds of disorders on the family because we've done 4 generations of substance use disorder and mental health in my family. And gambling fits in there, I'm finding. So Penny, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and what you've got to say. Oh, I guess I did say I would do the goals. We're going to look at some of the issues associated with gambling disorders and the impact on the family and the community, because you can't look at the family without thinking about the impact on the community. We'll discuss some strategies to address that impact of the gambling disorder, and we'll learn more about that because as we go, Penny can share some things and I can share some thoughts that are really personal experience because that brings it home. And we invite you to put things in the chat. If you've got questions, Robbie's going to be watching that for us. Don't hesitate to jot it down because our purpose is to give you what you need out of this. So on to Penny.
Okay, so I'm Penny Reinhold. I am the Women's Residential Treatment Coordinator for the Our House. I'm also the coordinator for the gambling program. And like Robbie said, I became certified as a gambling addictions counselor in 2020. I didn't think about how gambling disorder was an addiction until I took the training that Robbie presented. And I started to look at family issues within my own family and was able to recognize my father who's deceased, but through my childhood, my dad had a strong gambling addiction. And it brought back some memories of different things that went on in the household associated with his gambling addiction. And how it contributed to the destruction of our family. And so I have found this field very interesting and continue to try to learn more about this addiction and the impact that it has on families and community. So, Robbie, if you could post that first poll question.
We losing? There we go.
Here we go.
There you go. Okay, they're answering now. Penny, Nancy, it looks like we're at about 83% on our way. Usually give a minute or so. So how many years of experience do you have working with problematic gambling? 0 to 1 years, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, or 10 plus years? We're about 95%, so I'll hold on for 10 seconds. That might be the 5% that is me, Penny, and not Nancy. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then show the results here so you guys everybody can see. There we are.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay.
Basically,
About a half.
at least half.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what brought you into the field of gambling disorder? For me, it was my connection with being a substance abuse counselor and was offered the opportunity to take the training. And like I said, I wasn't aware of the intensity of the problem within my family until I took the training. So what brought you into this field? And if you could add that in the chat, that would be helpful. So if we look at the definition of gambling, gambling means that you're willing to risk something of value in the hopes of getting something of greater value. And when I talk with clients about this, the things that we value in life oftentimes are different. Someone who has a lot of money doesn't see money as something of great value oftentimes. For clients that we have in our residential programs, gambling to them might be that they're placing bets on what's going on in treatment in hopes of gaining somebody's dessert, or a second sandwich or something like that. And when we looked at it as far as in the prison system, commissary was oftentimes what people were betting on or to earn because they saw that of greater value. So compulsive gambling, also called gambling disorder, is the uncontrollable urge to keep gambling despite the toll it takes on your life. And when we look at substance abuse disorder, we as addiction counselors know that clients will continue to use the substance over and over again despite losing everything that they've got. And that is true also of the gambling addict. So in the state of Illinois, legal gambling, we've got 10 casinos and 1 riverboat. We've got the racetracks with horse betting, off and on track, lotteries, online sports betting, video gaming. And the state of Illinois has 7,920 video gaming terminals, which is higher than Las Vegas. So we have more video gaming terminals in the state of Illinois than they do in Las Vegas. And you can't drive down the street in Charleston, Illinois, without seeing all of those flags that say video gaming, slots, and they're popping up all over the place, even in really small towns. So the local gas stations, those video slot machines are everywhere. One of the most disturbing things that I had happen early in my career as a gambling addictions counselor is the young man who had been in treatment with me for a few months, and he and his wife, and she had talked with me, and we had talked about different things to help him avoid getting into situations where he might be tempted to gamble. And they had stopped to get gas one evening, and she was pumping the gas and he went in to pay for it. Well, he had a $50 bill. She was going to put $30 worth of gas in. He went to pay for it. And the guy said, you're going to have to take that back into the video gaming room to get change for that $50 bill before you can pay for your gas, because I don't have that kind of cash in here. And so he went back to change out the $50 bill. And in his mind, he was thinking about, well, I could spend the other 20 in on the slots and she'd never know. And about that time, she come busting through the door and laid him out. So, you know, a lot of the gas stations, the local gas stations that have the video gaming machines in the back will do that to try to get their customers to go into that video gaming room. So some of the signs that we look for with someone with a gambling problem, of course, they're lying about the amount that they're gambling. The gambler is always chasing their losses. You know, there's always going to be that next big win, and they will play and play and play, whether they make a big win or not. The gambler oftentimes is borrowing money. They're always betting with more and more. They're obsessed with gambling. Even when they're not at the gaming machine, they can't stop thinking about it. And they gamble out of need. It fulfills something inside of them. And if we don't treat that and help them find fulfillment somewhere else, we are not going to be successful. So Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I was just flipping through some of the comments in chat, and some people say, well, it's just part of my job, but more and more people are recognizing that this really is a serious problem, and expand knowledge of progress disorders along with co-occurring with substance use and mental health conditions, wanting to expand addiction knowledge for reasons to come into the field. I feel like the gambling is a little bit newer to me, but as I have read through volumes of stuff preparing, because we presented at the ICB conference last fall and had some dynamite reaction to talking about the whole problem of gambling and the impact on the family, and some sharing. And we're going to do it again in March. So those of you that are going to be at the ICB in March, come see us. But looking at a lot of the relationships as she went through that signs of a problem, I'm sitting here thinking, with my 40-some years in this field, this fits so many things. And as we look at the impact of gambling, you're going to also see the impact of other issues that are out there. The loss of household or personal money. As I've read through the stories and been aware of this, it seems like money just disappears. We don't know where it goes. You know, the joint bank account's empty. There's no extra spending money. One thing that I have observed, we're in a college town, is a lot of college students are very much into this. So that impacts their families back home. If they're spending their monthly money that they have for their room and board and meals, or if they're accessing the credit cards that they get so that they have resources while they're at college, suddenly it impacts the whole family, because they may end up out of school, or the family has to find another way to fill that need for money. Another thing that happens is it negatively affects relationships. If you can't trust that there's going to be money in your bank account, if you can't trust that there's going to be food on your table, it definitely is going to affect relationships. And the more I read, as I was going through some of the Gam-Anon stories and things, what I saw over and over again is it seems to be a hidden thing. It seems like it gets pretty serious oftentimes before the family members realize what's going on. It creates poor communication, arguments, anger. Some of the data and research I was reading talks about how violence is escalated in those situations. Confusion of the family roles and responsibilities. You know, who takes the lead, who manages the money, who's responsible for seeing that the bills are paid. And if it's one person that's not gambling and is not aware of it, suddenly finds that's their responsibilities, but there's no money, there's also a real stigma. There's a real shock there that goes with that. A lot of lies and deception. Neglect of the family. If you're out gambling, then you're not with your family. And development of gambling problems and other addictions within the family is quite common. And I read a lot about that recently. And it's really opened up my eyes to something new in the whole field of substance use disorder and mental health issues that may be connected with that. So I think that these are all just the tip of the iceberg when you look at that. Have you got anything to add into that, Penny? That
Yeah, so when I was out in the community, one afternoon getting gas myself, something occurred in the convenience mart that I was in. And a young lady behind the counter was talking to me about the people that she sees coming in to play their video gaming machines. And she opened up to me and told me that she had to call DCFS a couple times because parents were coming in and leaving their children in the car overnight to sleep while they were inside of the video gaming machines. And this was a convenience mart right off the interstate. And the kids, were being left out in the car in the cold all night long so that mom or dad could come inside and play the slot machines. And she said, I hated to have to call DCFS and get them involved, but she said, I didn't know what else to do. So the impact on these kids is extremely significant. I think, they are being ignored oftentimes. So that was one thing that I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I've heard you tell that story before, and it actually reminds me of some of the incidents that happened back when I did a lot of work with DCFS and substance use disorder, and the children being left out in the car and the authorities having to be called. And the person that was responsible for that just doesn't seem to understand the impact of that.
Right. Right.
What consistently came up as I was looking at the information and refreshing myself with this and looking at family, I got stacks of family stuff right here on my desk, is a couple of other concerning issues. There's consistent evidence of an association between gambling problems and family violence. The thing that I think is a little concerning is we know through the pandemic and with COVID that family violence has gone up. So you've got multiple layers happening in families, and oftentimes it's not identified. And part of that's been because of some of the restrictions that we've had with the pandemic, but in other areas, we have a tendency to hide that family violence. Children with parents who have gambling problems are also much higher risk of developing their own gambling problems. And I put this picture in here because I thought that is not uncommon to see kids doing things, looking at those risk factors versus protective factors. And this is a risk factor. Because the message is this is an okay way to live and okay to do things. So I think that it's worth kind of looking at that. You want to go ahead and flip it because we're going to get to more information about the impact on children in a minute. But I came across a book called The Impact. Well, it's a brochure, a pretty in-depth one. The Impact of Gambling Problems on Families. And Nikki Dowling put that together. And the copy you've got doesn't have the credits. I'll have to make sure that I get those to Robbie because I went in and put them. We couldn't get my PowerPoint to come up, and this is some that I had sent to Penny right before I added a few credits. Looking at physical complaints with people in the family setting, with adults, headaches, seem to be really a major physical complaint. Gastrointestinal ailments and hypertension, just those things that go with the physical reaction to your fears or to your environment or your uncertainty. Or suddenly you find there's no money in the bank to buy food, or there's no money in the bank to buy gas to go to work, or there's no job that you thought was actually there. So, you know, it's that physical reaction that you get. Not uncommon with people with different kinds of disorders in the people that they love, in the other people. For children, there seems to be a tendency to have asthma and allergies at a higher rate, and chronic headaches, which kind of all fits together with some of what we've seen with the adults and looking at that information. You can flip it again. We've got one more, a couple more of these. Behavioral difficulties with adults that may be dealing with that in their family, the chaos that's created by someone's gambling. They themselves may have excessive drinking in order to be able to escape what's going on in their environment. Smoking, over or under eating, and impulsive spending themselves. Thinking, well, I can justify it. With children and behavior, we see a higher rate of running away. Oftentimes I think that it's because, as I've read through this, that children feel like it's their fault. And that's one of the things that's very important that we address, is that it's not their fault, helping children understand that. See more of the use of alcohol or tobacco, because we know that there seems to be a higher rate of that with people with gambling disorders. And again, if we look at the risk and protective factors out there for children, we know that they are more likely, if they see it in their environment, and alcohol use and tobacco use is okay, especially if it's at a higher level than what we would prefer, they see it as okay. Asking your child to go get you a beer is a risk factor if you look at the risk factor research, because it gives them the message that it's okay. Overeating with children, not the undereating, but overeating, to make themselves feel better. And some lower academic issues, employment performance if they are teenagers, and a higher rate of illegal acts, of getting in trouble with the law, of some of those things that I thought was kind of interesting as I read through this and looked at the information that came through this. Okay, Denny, one more. Oops, we've got one missing.
Well, this is the group that I had, so.
I guess maybe we didn't. All right, well, let's go ahead with this, because it's going to cover it. I think that the impact on children, as with a lot of other things, is something we really need to look at. And when we wrap up here, we've got some suggestions of things to do with children, not just families as a rule. Children can feel neglected, depressed, or angry. That kind of fits with what we already saw. I look at this picture and I go, oh, you can just imagine what's running through his mind. There's a fight going on at home over money. There's suddenly they have to pick up and move with no warning because their rent wasn't paid and they've been evicted, or the house is being closed, being closed on, looking at that feeling of depression and anger, and children become stressed. I think oftentimes we as adults forget how stressed children can become. It's not just us adults that carry that load and take that chaos of disorders on our back. Children do too. Oftentimes, especially if they're old enough as teenagers and stuff, they'll turn to substance use or substance abuse. And many times, they probably believe they're the problem. You hear that in a lot of instances. And oftentimes they may have had the message given to them. Well, if it didn't cost so much to give you this or this or this, I wouldn't have to gamble to get money, to rationalize that and put that blame on someone else. Just like well, if you didn't make so much noise, I wouldn't drink beer all evening. You know, there's those kinds of rationalizations that get put on children, and they so internalize it. So believing that they are the cause of the problem is very sad and very serious. And again, they may assume the role of primary caregiver. If somebody's so busy gambling, either it could be on the computer, they could actually not be at home, they could be out somewhere, they could be sitting in the car with the younger child while mom or dad are in doing the slots. You know, they take that role of primary caregiver, making sure that things are taken care of, making sure that the younger siblings are taken care of. And once again, they may feel the need to take sides in the arguments, not really understanding the whole dynamic of the disorder, of the gambling disorder. And that puts them right in the middle. So I think that it's important that we look at that. And I just wanted to check the time. We're doing really good. And somebody says they're losing connection. Zoom's being being stubborn today.
Now, Nancy, you sound okay. A couple of times, but you guys sound great. And we're about 30 minutes in, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's go ahead and do the next poll question. And I think that Penny's going to do some talking about that in response to that. But I also have some comments I want to make around that as we look at that in families.
Okay, there it is, Nancy. Just launched it. So according to site guides, what substance use disorder is more likely to be identified as a co-occurring disorder? Is it opioids, A, B, alcohol, C, cocaine, or D, marijuana? Well, very good, guys. Got about 84 have answered, 88%. It looks like most of the answers seem, well, I'll let you guys answer that. Okay. I don't want to spoil anything, right?
I think the group has an opinion.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the results.
All right. So we have a lot of smart people, right? Alcohol definitely is associated. Alcohol use is definitely associated with gambling disorder. An alcohol use disorder is the most frequently reported co-occurring disorder among people with a gambling disorder. As far as substance use goes, 75% of those diagnosed with a gambling disorder also have a co-occurring alcohol use disorder, and almost 40% of gamblers had a co-occurring drug use disorder. One of the things that the Our House has taken on as we've started treating gambling addiction is the process when somebody first makes contact with our agency for the medical screening that we do by phone. We have now implemented a 15-minute short gambling screening that we do with them to identify if they have some issues with gambling, at the same time that we're assessing to see if they have a need for substance use disorder treatment. Another drug that I am finding as a clinician to be popular use among those who are gambling is methamphetamines. You think about the high that a person gets when using methamphetamines and that need to go and be up for hours and hours on end. Well, gambling fits the bill for that. You know, going to the casino high on meth and not knowing what time of day it is and all of those things that the casinos do to keep the person engaged in gambling, meth addiction feeds right into that. So with co-occurring disorders, alcohol is the number one, but as a clinician, I have found a lot of methamphetamine use among those who have a gambling addiction as well. So people who develop gambling disorders early in life also tend to have problems with substance abuse or impulsivity disorders. And women who develop gambling disorders are more likely than men to also have problems with anxiety, depression, or bipolar disorder. One of the studies that we had taken a look at was in Oregon, And it says here that nearly one half, or 47.9% of individuals seeking treatment for problem gambling also had comorbid personality disorders, with the most prevalent being narcissistic, antisocial, avoidant, obsessive compulsive, and borderline and personality disorders. So not only do we need to be assessing for gambling disorder when we're treating someone with a substance use disorder, it needs to implement mental health where people are seeking treatment for mental health issues. Nancy brought up earlier the prevalence of violence in the homes of persons with problem gambling disorder. And I was looking here, where to go to? Hang on just a second. It says here in this study from Oregon, individuals who engage in problem gambling are more likely to lose control of their anger and engage in aggressive behaviors than individuals who do not have problem gambling. And so the fights over money and things like that, I'm sure, oftentimes can lead to violence. So Nancy, did you have anything you wanted to add with that?
Well, I mean, I think that the challenge, or not, let me put it maybe this way, it's an observation I had as more and more as I read stuff. I was taking notes in articles and information that came out. And as I was looking at the issues around families, I would write SUDS next to it, because the things that we were seeing coming out of the chaos of families with gambling disorders, for me, with all my years in the field dealing with substance use disorder, I'm going, this sounds like the similarity is so great that I would love, if we were in person, we'd be doing this. Put a chart up of gambling disorders and what are the symptoms of the chaos in the family, and then the substance use disorder on the other side, or have one group do this and one group do that, and then bring them together and look at the similarities, because there's so much similarity in the chaos and the stress that it puts on families that, and you know, if 75% of those diagnosed with a gambling disorder have a co-occurring issue, that's not surprising that there's similarities. The one thing that I did observe as I was reading through all this information was that with a gambling disorder, some of it seemed to be even more stressful, or not more violent, but more, I don't know. You're not as likely to lose a house overnight with substance use disorder as you are with a gambling disorder, because somebody's bet it and it's gone.
Yes.
You know, that type of thing, because I've heard stories about and read stories about things happening that fast. I was reading one about a female whose husband traveled, and she'd get bored and she got hooked on gambling and was able to cover it up to a certain point, and was even able to borrow money against their house, until suddenly one day he went to pay for something that he needed a pretty large resource out of their savings and stuff, and it was gone, including the danger to the house. She'd been able to do that. I've never ran into somebody that it was quite that serious without the gambling being it, but the similarity is so great. And the impact on the children is like reading that description over and over again. You know, so the house is gone. They have to move immediately because they're being evicted from their apartment. Doing that with especially young children, is really scary. So the impact's there. And the similarities there.
And what you said about, you know, oftentimes the gambling is such a hidden addiction. Family members don't know until it gets to the point where the gambler is on the verge of losing everything or has lost everything. You know, the spouse that comes home from work one day and the house is being foreclosed on because the house payment's not been made for months and months. And so, you know, with substance use disorder, oftentimes we see the symptoms because they're really clear in the person's behaviors and their physical appearance. Whereas with gambling disorder, physical appearance, you may not notice as much of what's going on with the gambling addict. And so it oftentimes becomes this big shock when it all comes down, you know, and they lose everything and have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So,
I think, you know,
okay.
it's obvious that there's definitely a relationship there.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next poll question. Whoop. There we go.
Okay. Well, you know what? You know what I got, Penny? I don't know if I missed something on this one, and I apologize. It's got identify the most accurate response. So maybe I missed the question. Oh, no, I didn't. No, this is how it's ordered. Okay,
Nope.
I apologize. Okay.
No,
Yes,
no,
I got you. I had to think. Now, I promise I had to read through these because I had to get them in, right? Okay. So A is suicidal behaviors and self-harm are more common with persons with substance use disorder. B, even after addressing conditions such as substance use disorders, anxiety, and depression, people with problematic gambling continue to have suicide rates about 3 times higher than that of the general population. Or suicide rates are over 5 times higher with problematic gambling than those without gambling behaviors. Or D, all the above are true. So please identify the most accurate response. We're about 84%. About 92%, 96%, T minus 5 seconds. And then I will share the results here.
So the answer, of course, is the all of the above. One of the things that I have found in working as a clinician with substance use or gambling disorder is I had a young lady who came into treatment in our program for her methamphetamine addiction. And she went through residential treatment and was transferred then to outpatient services. And it wasn't until she was in outpatient services that she received the assessment for her gambling addiction. In discussing with her clinician her substance use, she started to open up a little bit about the fact that she would get high and then she would go to the slots and be there for hours on end. And so we set her up and we did an assessment with her. It was during my assessment with her that she opened up with me and said the main reason that she got into the Hour House for residential treatment was because she had attempted to kill herself. She told me that her spouse had, she told me that she had cleared out her spouse's savings account on 2 occasions in 1 year. And the second time, she just knew that he was not going to understand. And so she had gone into their bedroom and had a belt around her neck and was about to step off the block she was standing on in their closet when he busted through the door and cut her down. And this young lady was in her late 20s with 4 very small children. But she was at that point where she felt like there was no hope for her, that there was no treatment for it, and she just couldn't handle it anymore. And so suicide among gambling addicts attempts is very high. That feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, we all believe that the world goes around with the almighty dollar. And when you don't have access to that, when you've lost all of the money, how are you supposed to feed yourself or have shelter? So according to Michael Goldman, senior employee assistant program counselor in Cook County, it's estimated that 18 to 25% of all compulsive gamblers will attempt suicide at some point. And so with an estimated 2 million compulsive gamblers and 4 to 6 million problem gamblers in the United States, the potential for larger numbers of suicide deaths brought on by gambling is extremely significant. And sorry about that. Suicide isn't something that we oftentimes talk about, but I think that it's really important when someone is doing an assessment for someone who has a gambling addiction or a potential gambling addiction, that we also assess for suicidality. Are they having current thoughts? Have they had attempts in the past? It's really important to gather that information so that we know that that person is safe.
Penny, I wonder, as I listen to this, what the pandemic's done to that too, if it's increased that, oops, flip back. I was just responding to your,
Sorry about that.
to the suicide stuff. Any indication whether that has increased during the pandemic and people being so closed in, or?
I have not found any updated numbers on that. Now, what I will say is that with the online sports betting and the ability to gamble on your cell phones nowadays, I think the rates of gambling are going up a lot. And because there's the shutdown of in-person 12-step meetings like Gamblers Anonymous, you know, that in-person contact and being able to share those experiences with other people is really important. And because they're not doing those in person nowadays, or some areas are not, I think it makes it hard for them to feel connected. So then I would say the rates are probably going up, but I don't have any numbers on that.
Okay, yeah. I hadn't really read much on the suicide, but just as you were talking, I'm sitting here thinking of, you know, the rate of alcohol use, especially among women, and we know that family violence has gone up and everything. It would certainly make sense. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting is one thing that I have been introduced to, and part of that is because I've been introduced to it, is substance users, meth, heroin, etc. Whoa, we lost the.
Was that by design? I didn't know. I think Penny had the
No,
slides.
it wasn't, but that's okay, because I was just, I can really talk through the
All right.
boy that was left. I was just gonna say, is people that are
So
living on
Learn
the
is out
street-
here in the country and I got booted out.
Yeah, that's right. So we're fine. Is that looking at the scratch offs and the slots, I'm amazed at the number of people that I have ran into or have been introduced to in the last year or two through their family members, etc., that are living off gambling, and yet they're homeless and on the street. You know, that's how they're buying their drugs. They do a scratch off and they take it back in, and if they get enough to buy a pack of cigarettes, and then they can go get something else. It's just, it's everywhere, and it's concerning, and it's concerning to families and everything. So I was just looking at the time. So let's talk about some things that we can do about this. Let me find my copy of the PowerPoint, and we'll just talk through it some. And if you have anything as far as the chat, please put it up there. What are some things that you know work with the family as you're working with families? And that's one question I really wish I'd gone ahead and asked, is what are some things that you do? If you're in a family and you're going to talk to your person about the concern, You need to let them know how you feel. And this has been pretty consistent through all the information. The one thing that has surprised me is consistently the information has said, talk to the person that's the gambler, talk to your family member, plan the talk, know what you're going to say, and be clear about it and be fair about it and be respectful. Because like with any disorder, there's still a human being with a substance use disorder. Oh, there we go. And know that they still deserve respect. And I always have felt that way about anyone we work with. If they walk into my office or if they've walked into an office that I supervise, I expect them to have a display of respect. But tell them how you feel, listen to what they say. It's very important as you go through that. And this comes from a whole collection of things. I started writing down what the recommendations were, and they were pretty consistent. Ask them for their opinion. Where do they feel like they are? Some of the things that are a little bit different with this intervention, I think it's a little more open than I might do with a substance use disorder if I was talking to a family member, but this makes sense. Encourage them to start considering ways to deal with their issue or their problem, especially if there's been, an obvious issue come up that you have to deal with, such as not having a place to live or not having the resources you need to pay your bills or to make your house payment. Steps to take care of the family is look at having healthy free time activities and some healthy socializing. If you can head the family in that direction, set household rules about these are even a couple of the things I read said to start with, you might set aside a certain amount that could be used and then start working toward, well, this is an issue because you can't manage that. And I thought that was kind of an interesting approach. One of the most important, I think, is get professional help and get self-help. Go to Gam-Anon, go to places where you can get that support. Protect yourself and the family. This is really important. I think that it's pretty consistent when you look at the chaos of substance use disorder, potential violence. Protect yourself and the family. Make sure you have a plan to remove yourself if there is any violence that comes out because of this. Having that plan is important. Taking care of your own mental and physical health is really important. And if the person that you care about, the person that's in your family that has the gambling disorders, is not doing something to take care of themselves, it's okay to know you can take care of yourself. You need to have that protection for yourself and for your family and take care of you mentally and physically and protect your finances. Get some help if you need to. Open your own account, your separate account. Those things are important so that you can move forward and take care of yourself, no matter what the person that you care about decides. And I think that's true when it comes to substance use disorder too. One of the things that I always talk about, coming from a family history of substance use disorder, and I suspect as I've learned more and more about this, that my father probably liked to gamble a little bit too, looking back on what we found after he passed and was going through his things. Taking care of yourself is the best thing that you can do to help somebody else move forward, and taking care of your family, especially if there's children involved. I wanted to kind of briefly look at letting children, if you have children that are being impacted by this, and is sit down with them and allow them to talk about their feelings about what's going on in the family. That's important. They need to be able to know that they can safely say what they're feeling, what they're observing, because it's quite scary. And that's true if there's substance use disorder going on in the family. You have to make sure that they understand they're not to blame, no matter what kind of blame comes back on them. It's not their fault. But to help them understand that. You want to keep children occupied, have them doing things. That's where some of that socializing comes in, and free time activities. Do things that are healthy, that can move them forward, that take their mind off the craziness and the chaos that may be going on in the family that's related to the finances and to the gambling, and support them. I think depending on their age, you have to be honest with them, but you can't tell a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old the same thing you might share with a teenager in looking at that. So, finding that help. But I truly believe that some of the most important stuff is looking at professional help. We're going to take 2 more minutes, then we're going to open it up for any comments, questions. Let us know in the chat what you might need. What else do you need from us? What can we do to help you? I was looking at some things I just found this morning in looking at ineffective coping strategies, nagging, screaming, consistently expressing disapproval. I mean, this is true of substance use disorder too. So here we've got our columns that go together. It's very much the same. Making threats, punishing, emotional pleading, that doesn't work, I'm assured. Financial assistance, which means assisting them financially. Bailing the gambler out of jail, accompanying the gambler to gamble, not unlike family members or significant others that, well, if I can't beat them, I'll join them on a drinking journey, that recovery journey. I did that, doesn't work. Thank goodness I didn't do it for very long before I realized this is a silly thing to be doing. Providing referral information, it says, is not necessarily a coping strategy, but I don't think it ever hurts to have information available, have a pamphlet laying around. But looking at effective coping strategies, setting boundaries and limits, taking one day at a time. That's so important with any disorder. One day at a time. That's all we've got anyway, is 1 hour, 1 minute at a time, and living that way. Finding something spiritual or faith-based that, that lets you know that there's something out there that you're a part of that's larger than yourself. Discovering new interests or activities that can take your focus off of that. Releasing guilt and responsibility. Again, it's like the 3 threes. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it. Well, that's the same thing with substance use disorder. Any comments to that, Penny? Or
No.
Yeah, but it's true. It's taking a look at that and letting go of that guilt, recognizing gambling is an addiction. So important.
I guess I do want to say, I think that the shame and the guilt of the gambling addict flows over into the family, and when it comes down and they've lost everything, there's so much shame about not, for the family member, about not recognizing what was going on until it all imploded. And I've talked a little bit about my family history. My mother, after I took this training and was talking with my mom about gambling addiction, she opened up and let me know that her father had a gambling addiction. He lost the house, he lost his job, he lost their vehicle and everything when she was 14 years old. But that had never been discussed in our family until I opened it up and started talking about what I was doing as in my mission. And so I think the guilt and the shame of those things, oftentimes contributes to that hidden addiction that nobody really understands.
Right. And can be such a hidden addiction. That's what I said, is going through my father's stuff. He was alcoholic. I suspect there was more there when we started going through the stuff that we discovered after he passed. So looking at that, but seeking professional assistance, giving respect to the gambler, which I mentioned before, and supporting the gambler in treatment. If they want treatment, if they're going to get resources, if they're willing to go to GA, support them in that. Don't be jealous of the time they spend doing that. Support them in that. Yes. And get your own help. So I think that it's just a start, tip of the iceberg. But I hope that this kind of gives people a better picture of what's going on.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Penny. We just have a couple of minutes, so if you guys are good with it, we can perhaps maybe open the chat maybe
Oh,
for
absolutely.
questions. Yep, we're getting some thank yous.
Absolutely.
And great stuff. And thank you for sharing all that. And the family dynamic, I talk about this too in the training. It's just, it looks very similar to how the substance use disorder plays out in the family dynamic in family therapy, right? And it's I've got someone now on my caseload. It was a referral from a family therapist. She did her job in coaching the family and drawing down those boundaries to where she said, I got to go get help or I'm going to lose my son and my husband, right? Thank God for that. And I told her, of course, she's my client. I wanted to side with her, but when the time was ready, I said, that family therapist saved your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing that I didn't even mention that I think, and I'm just going to throw it out there since we only got a minute left, is there's also grief issues tied to all that. Grief for the things they're losing, grief for where the family's going. That's just a whole nother layer of signs and symptoms that we could list next to substance use and
Yes.
gambling and grief. And I think it all goes together. And we have to look at it because it's real. That grief is real.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it plays out similarly because we talked a lot about substance use disorder because that's the world I come from too, Nancy. So,
right.
And we talked about this and grief comes into place so much with this and in different levels, everything from grieving the loss of the substance to the loss of the whole life. It can be just one form of grief, but I tell you, grief counselors who are well read, which I'm not with grief, but if you've got a leg up in fighting this disease, this condition, this disorder.
Right.
Absolutely, I agree. Oh, and we've got something else here. Thank you, Kelly. So you're getting a lot of compliments too. So
yeah, we know Kelly.
Kelly, thank you. Yes.
Yes.
And I thank you too. It's been really great, and I hope we get to work more together. Nancy, Penny, it's great seeing you, and I think this was really helpful. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, guys, everyone have a great weekend. It is Friday. I know it's cold all over here in Illinois and in Massachusetts, but it's January, right? So, but thank you for the great information. And again, this information, the slides will be available on weknowthefeeling.org, and also recordings should be available as well. If you need anything, you guys know how to reach me. And again, Penny, Nancy, thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Bye,
Okay.
everybody. Have a
Okay.
good weekend.
See you guys. All right. Bye-bye.